Hello, welcome. Please pay attention because Canada is not the nice country that Americans were fooled and deceived into thinking that Canada is. So, this is a book about a Canadian serial killer. Now, if you Americans are wondering why you've never heard of this Canadian serial killer, it has to do with the corruption, the fact that the Canadian media, whenever the Canadian government does something bad and horrendous, the Canadian media, the Canadian news, the fake news as Trump calls it, will rarely, if at all, report on evil, bad, heinous stuff that the government of Canada does. So that's why you have probably never heard of this guy. And you'd be like, how did Americans not hear about this? Because the government of Canada, they didn't even want to do the story at all. If it were really up to the government of Canada, no one would know about this, not even Canadians. But especially the government of Canada was exposed as being liars. The victims were screaming to the Canadian media, why aren't you telling people this, right? So the victims of this guy, this was a serial killer. His name was Colonel Russell Williams. And in this video, in this live stream, I'm going to show you a couple of the ways that the Canadian government gets away with covering up stuff. So, as you can see, this guy, he is a colonel, military colonel of all of Canada, the military base commander of Trenton of all of Canada at one point. He had a career of 20 years approximately. How does a military commander of 20 years get away with all of that evil stuff without anyone knowing? How? No, it's because they did know. The Canadian police knew because they were buddies with him and they helped him cover up the crimes. That's what happened. And especially since the victims of Colonel Russell Williams sued the police. Russell Williams victims sues police. Victim of Russell Williams says she was left tied up for hours. The police were not investigating, by the way. The police knew what happened. The police were trying to cover up even further. But especially, who leaves a victim who was brutally raped? Who leaves a rape victim tied up for hours after she manages to call the police? The Canadian police. If this doesn't prove that the Canadian police are nut jobs, then I don't know what will. And so the victims even sued, and there was more than one victim, by the way. But I'm going to explain why it's only saying one victim. Meanwhile, there were lots of victims of this guy, including American victims, which the Canadian government totally covered up because obviously the government of Canada did not want a war to break out between the United States and Canada. So, of course, the Canadian government especially covered up the fact that this military psychopath of Canada is actually also linked to missing Americans as well, especially missing Americans that went missing near the Canadian border. So, if we go into one of these articles, let's show you now a way how the government of Canada gets away with maybe not fully covering up something, but definitely making it harder for people to find information. So, if I just click on one of these articles, watch what happens. Let's go to the first one to show that I'm not just picking a specific. So, as we can see, Williams victim sues Lori Massacott, a assault victim of Russell Williams, is suing Williams, his ex-wife, and provincial police because she feels betrayed by the people she thought would protect her. And isn't that amazing? Canadians, we pay some of the highest taxes in the world. What are Canadians paying high taxes for? Why are Canadians paying such high taxes? Meanwhile, the police, the lazy Canadian police, are useless. Not only are they useless, but when you actually call them for help, they leave victims tied up for hours. Why? Why do the Canadian police do that? Because the Canadian police are a bunch of thugs. They're criminals themselves. The Canadian police are thugs and criminals. They're murderers and rapists. And they knew for 20 years that this guy was a rapist and a murderer. And because the Canadian police themselves are also rapists and murderers, they helped this guy cover up. They helped him cover up the crimes because the Canadian police are just as bad as this guy. They're a big gang. The Canadian police are a big gang of psychopaths. They're a big gang of rapists. The Canadian police are a big gang of rapists, psychopaths, and they were in cahoots with this guy. They knew what he was doing for 20 years. And that's why when the victims called the police for help, the Canadian police turned around and tried to cover up even further and would leave victims tied up for hours. So, by the way, Candace Owens is an investigative reporter who's really good. I really hope this YouTube live stream gets the attention of Candace Owens because this is one of the major cover-ups in Canada that Candace Owens needs to expose to the world because obviously she has a much bigger platform than I do. She's got millions of subscribers. I am nowhere near at the level of Candace Owens, and I'm actually not by profession an investigative reporter myself. So if Candace Owens could take this and really do a deep dive investigation into especially this incident, that would be great. Now, I do know other things as well because I used to work for the government of Canada, and I know things actually that happened that were covered up that never even made it to the news at all. Like even there was a big cover up, and but this at least made it to the news. But I know of things that happened in Canada that were extremely covered up because they were so heinous that the government of Canada would never even let it reach the news. That's the kind of stuff that I know. And unfortunately, like if for example if it's already in the news, yeah, it's even not safe to even talk about stuff that's even made the news. Like I'm at risk to even talk about this, to even talk about a public book like this, because the Canadian media, right, the Canadian military, they're a gang of rapists, they're a gang of thugs. They beat people up, they tie people up, they leave them tied up in their basement. The Canadian military, they're a bunch of thugs. The Canadian police are a bunch of thugs. And I was beat up even just for talking about this. Even just for talking about stuff that was in the news, I was beat up and attacked and harassed. So I especially do not feel safe until I am given amnesty, until I'm given safe refuge in the United States of America. As a Canadian, still in Canada, I do not feel safe yet, not yet, to talk about the stuff that it was so bad that the Canadian government did, that was so bad that didn't even make the Canadian news, that was so bad. And I will at some point, and this is why I contacted Candace Owens. I went to the Candace Owens website and I told them that I would like to go on the Candace Owens show and I would, but only until I've been given safety in the United States. Like I want to leave Canada forever. I want to leave Canada forever. I don't feel safe in Canada. These people beat me up. These people stalked me. These people harassed me. These people murdered my family members. These Canadian military thugs, these Canadian police officers, Canadian military thugs, they're psychopaths. They're sociopaths. They're lying sociopaths. They're psychopaths. And I don't feel comfortable saying certain things that I know because of course this is already public. Like this whole scandal, which is pretty shocking as it is already public, right? But there's even things that happened that I'm aware of, that I know of, that the government of Canada covered up because I worked for the government of Canada for several years and I was a whistleblower. And then I was wrongfully fired because I was wrongfully fired for trying to stand up for victims. I was wrongfully fired for trying to get the truth out there and to stand up to the evil Canadian government and say this is wrong. What they're doing is wrong. And I worked on a Canadian military base. I worked on a Canadian military base for years. I worked on a Canadian military base. I even had a special high security clearance. I had an extremely high security clearance. But then you know what happened? After I became a Canadian whistleblower, you know what the government of Canada did? They went in a whole campaign to destroy my credibility. They completely went on a rampage to destroy my credibility as a whistleblower, Canadian whistleblower. They even attacked me. They beat me up. They stole my evidence that I had collected. They attacked me. They tried to call me crazy. They put me. They had me locked up in a mental ward, and then they used the locking me up in a mental ward to try to destroy my credibility forever. Explain to me this. If I was truly crazy, then how does someone who's crazy get a job on a Canadian military base and works on a Canadian military base for years and is even given high security clearance? By the way, do I sound crazy? Am I talking crazy? Am I talking about ghosts or aliens or anything like that? Am I talking crazy right now? But especially explain to me that if I'm really crazy, then why would they give a crazy person a job in the Canadian military on a Canadian military base? And I had high security clearance as well. So if I was truly crazy, then why would they hired me in the first place to work on a Canadian military base? When I worked for years on a Canadian military base. I wasn't in the Canadian military. I was a civilian employee. Okay, let's make the distinction here, please. Because a lot of people, when I tell the story, they think, oh, were you in the military? No, I was a civilian employee working on a Canadian military base. Because they need more than just military people on a military base. They need business people, they need accountants, they need HR people, human resources people, they need firemen, they need all types of people to work on a Canadian military base. They need chefs, they need cooks, right? So it's more than just military people who work on a Canadian military base. They need all types of professions. They even need hairdressers, right? They need hairdressers. They need rehab people, especially rehab. They need domestic violence counselors because a lot of Canadian military guys would there was domestic violence, so they needed psychologists and psychotherapists to work on a Canadian military base. So Canadian military bases are not just military personnel. It's a lot of different professions that work on Canadian military bases. And I worked on a Canadian military base for years, and I was even given high security clearance. So explain to me how, if I'm crazy, why would they hire a crazy person in the first place? So the government of Canada, they destroyed my credibility, they destroyed my life. You wouldn't even know half the stuff they done to me. And I'm willing and I would like, and I would be more than happy to be given a lie detector test. In fact, when I contacted Candace Owens through her website, when I contacted the Candace Owens investigative team, I told them, I said, I would be willing to go on the Candace Owens show and I would be more than happy to take a lie detector test. And they could ask me any question they want. Any question that they want. I don't care. Any question. They could ask me any question and I would answer on a lie detector test because I am telling the truth. I am a real victim. I am a real victim of not only the government of Canada and all the evil stuff they do, but also of the major cover up when they and the fact that they destroyed my credibility, because that's what they do to victims. They call them crazy. And you want to know something? Look at this. You see her, who was one of the victims of Colonel Russell Williams. Guess what the Canadian media also did to her? They also called her crazy too. In fact, there's many news articles where Laurie Massacott states that when she initially called the police for help, they called her crazy and hung up the phone on her. So not only did they call me crazy, a Canadian whistleblower who worked on a Canadian military base for years, but they even called her crazy, Laurie Massacott crazy, a rape victim, a woman who was raped and left tied up in her basement by this sick nut job, Colonel Russell Williams. So do you see a pattern here? Do you not see a pattern? They called me crazy, they called her crazy, and there's actually another case as well. I can't mention it right now. There's many things that I do not feel comfortable mentioning until I have left Canada permanently and I have been given safety and refuge in the United States of America. Until I leave Canada permanently, there's especially certain things that I don't feel comfortable talking about because there's many things that haven't even made the news. There's many things that the government of Canada has done, evil things that were so bad that the government of Canada wouldn't even let it make the news at all. Okay. And it's dangerous enough just for me to talk about stuff that even made the news. Even just to talk about this, I am at risk to talk about this kind of stuff. Because when the Canadian military, when psychopaths like this guy, when they see me talking and exposing all of the government of Canada's secrets, military psychopaths like this guy, they follow me, they stalk me, they follow me at the grocery store. They follow me around. They're just waiting for me to walk into a dark corner of an alley or to go in a place where there's no one around. Okay? God forbid I went camping. God forbid I went camping in a forest where there's no one around. Okay? Although sometimes you have to get away from, because even in a public place, they don't care. They'll beat you up in a public place, and then they'll tell a story. They'll tell a story and they'll lie and say, "Oh, he deserved it. He deserved it. He was disrespected a girl or something." They'll say, "Oh, he called a woman fat and he deserves to be beat up." See, they're liars. They're total liars, right? So if they want to beat you up, they'll find you. The Canadian military, they'll find you. They'll beat you up. They'll try to silence you. They'll call you crazy. They'll falsely imprison you, and then they'll turn around and make up some excuses to why they beat you up. Like, oh, they beat him up not because he's a Canadian whistleblower. They beat him up because he insulted a woman and called her fat, and he deserved to be beat up. You see how they're liars? They'll totally make up stories like that to justify the victims beating up victims. I was a victim, and look, she was a victim as well, and they left her tied up in her basement for hours after she called the police. This is a news article which you can look up. If you look up Laurie Massicott sues the Canadian police, you can see for yourself. This victim as well. She literally called the Canadian police for help, and they left her tied up in her basement for hours. So I'm not the only victim that was attacked and abused for trying to report something, for trying to speak the truth, for trying to report the evil that the Canadian government does. So you see a pattern here. They do it to me. They did it to her. And like I said, there's other cases as well of horrible things that the government of Canada has gotten away with. There are cases and many things that I'm aware of because I worked on a Canadian military base for years. But those things I do not feel comfortable to talk about until I have been given safety and refuge in the United States of America, and I can leave Canada forever, permanently. That's just so bad. I am so afraid for my life because not only what they did to me in the past, but what they could potentially do to me again in the future. I am afraid for my life, and I would like to leave Canada forever and go to the United States for refuge, or Europe, or whichever country. It doesn't have to be the United States. If Germany or France or even Russia, any country sees my live stream and is willing to offer me safe refuge, then I will go. So this is not just some ploy because, a lot of Canadians are desperate to go to the United States. This is not just some ploy to go to the United States. I'll go anywhere. I'll go to any country that's safe, that's willing to provide me safety and refuge. I'll go to Europe. And I studied Russian for years. I'll even go to Russia. I'll even go to Mother Russia. I've studied Russian for years. I'm a language major. I studied foreign languages. So I do speak fluent Russian. I'll even go to Russia. Okay? So it's not just the United States. It's any country that's willing to provide me safety and refuge. So this is not just some ploy from a Canadian to try to go to the United States, because a lot of Canadians are desperate to go to the United States. Did you remember the article just 2 weeks ago of the Canadian who rented a ski-doo? He rented a, what's it called? A ski-doo, right? He rented a ski-doo and he actually crossed the border with a ski-doo. He went to a ski-doo rental place and he can use the ski-doo to cross the border, cross a lake, to cross a body of water to get to the United States from Canada. And he did it use as a ski-doo. This was just a few weeks ago, this article. It was on the internet. So a lot of Canadians are desperate to leave Canada and go to the United States. But I'm not just doing this because I just want to go to the United States. That's not true at all. See, that's why a lot of people try to spin the story. No, I'm a real victim. I'm a real whistleblower, and I will go to any country that is willing to provide safety and refuge. Okay, it's better obviously if I can speak the language. So obviously, if I go to the United States, I also can speak English. But I don't care. I'll go to Poland, even though I don't speak Polish. I'll go to Germany, even though I don't speak German. I'll go to Spain, even though I don't speak Spanish. I'll even go to Russia, although I do speak Russian, so that would be a bonus if I went to Russia, Mother Russia. But my point is this, is that this is not just some ploy for a Canadian to try to go to the United States. This is also me seriously needing safety and refuge from the horrible, evil government of Canada and all of the evil stuff they did. And if anyone doesn't believe me, like I said, if this isn't evidence enough that there's military psychopaths like this going around murdering people, and it's not just him, it's a gang of them. It's a whole gang of military psychopaths. It's a gang of them. They work as a gang. This was just a scapegoat. This was just one guy who took the fall for many, many different things. They used him as a scapegoat, and they didn't even want to admit that even he was guilty. They didn't even want to admit that this guy was guilty. See, that's why for 20 years this guy got away with all of the stuff he got away with. And then when they finally called the police on him, and when they realized that this guy is the one who's been raping and murdering the women, when this woman survives being brutally raped and she finally calls the police, they call her crazy, they hang up on her, and then they leave her tied up in her basement for hours. So this is what I'm saying. So there are many Canadian victims, many. And I'm not crazy. I'm in fact very intelligent. I speak many languages. And I worked for the Canadian government for years. I worked on a military base in Canada, and I was even given a high security clearance. So explain to me, okay, after the government of Canada purposely defamed me, the government of Canada purposely destroyed my credibility as a whistleblower, but then explain to me, if I was really crazy, then why would they give me the job in the first place? Why would they hire a crazy person? If I was truly crazy, then why would the government of Canada, the Canadian military, hire me in the first place? Why did I manage to work there for years? And why did I manage to have a high security clearance on a Canadian military base? So clearly I'm not crazy, because if I was truly crazy, like they're trying to destroy my credibility, the government of Canada, then why would they hired me in the first place? Right? As the government of Canada, are they known for hiring crazy people? Well, aside from this guy, who is a legitimate psychopath, but this guy is crazy in the sense like, okay, let's look at how really this crazy guy is. So he is, hold on a sec here. Sorry, 1 second. Having some technical difficulties because I have the article recently was hold on, I'm gonna pull it up. So this is the wife, Canadian serial killer. And look, it says wife of serial killer Russell Williams loses court battle. So what happened was the wife of Colonel Russell Williams knew. Okay, look what they do. See, I'm trying to read an article, and the wife of serial killer Colonel Russell Williams, she knew he was guilty. She knew he was a sick in the head. She knew it for years, and she also helped cover up for him. See, that's why not all women are innocent, right? Not all men are innocent, not all women are innocent. But a lot of women try to play the woman card and pretend as if they're innocent and they don't know. And look, she lost the court battle eventually. But she helped this guy cover up the crimes for years. So that's why it's especially hard, because there are legitimate women who are victims, like I showed you with Lori Massacott. She was a legitimate victim. But then there's also evil women as well who will help evil men cover up for things, like the wife of Colonel Russell Williams, who helped cover up things. So that's why it makes it so hard, because there's a lot of evil women out there that will either pretend to be the victim, or they'll make up lies and try to discredit people. And there's been evil women who made up lies about me as well. And unfortunately, women tend to be more believed in society. Okay, not always, not all 100% of the time, but in society, more often people believe women. Women can just bat their eyelashes and start crying. Next thing you know, the guys are pummeling you. Okay, if a woman's a liar and she makes up a story about me saying I yelled at her, saying I called her fat or something, the next thing you know, she'll have a bunch of guys beating me up, beating the crap out of me. So women tend to be more believed. Even the evil women, the bad women, unfortunately. But there are also good women, and there are women who are legitimately victims, like I showed you with Lori Massacott, and they called her crazy, they hung up on her, they left her tied up in her basement. But then there's also evil women going around who are covering up for guys like this guy. And this was the wife of serial killer Colonel Russell Williams. Eventually, she lost the court battle, but this was after years of the lies. She was married to him for years. You don't think that the wife knew what he was up to, what he was doing? She probably even helped cover up even more than just that, because there are speculation that she actually helped get rid of the bodies with him. Now, I can't go there specifically, and that's why I want a Candace Owens as an investigative reporter to do a full investigation into this case. I actually am involved in other cases. This is just an example to show you how evil and corrupt the government of Canada is. This case made the news, but I am involved with other cases that were I am aware of things that happened in the government of Canada that were so heinous that they didn't even make the news. The government of Canada managed to do a full-blown cover-up, that there's stuff that happened that didn't even make the news because, God forbid, the government of Canada let those things get to the media and get to the news. But this especially the government of Canada didn't want to admit to either. It was only because the victims of Colonel Russell Williams were screaming to the media. Like, they left her tied up in her basement, Lori Massacott. They called her crazy. They hung up on her. And it took her years of screaming to the media and also fighting publication bans, because that's another way they do it. The government of Canada, they try to make it look as if the publication bans are to protect the victims. The publication bans are used as a tool to further cover up the government of Canada so that the government of Canada doesn't have to report it to the media what they did. That's the real reason they use publication bans. It's not to protect the victims. The real reason that the government of Canada uses publication bans is so that they don't have to report everything exactly in the media. Believe me, if the government of Canada actually told the full truth and nothing but the truth in the news, then oh man, like the United States would have invaded Canada years ago. The United States would have made the United States would have made Canada the 51st state years ago. Trump would have had more than enough evidence years ago to invade Canada and make Canada the 51st state, because you don't even know half the stuff that goes on in Canada. There is so much evil stuff that they do and they get away with in Canada. So I was trying to find in the book, hold on a sec here. I want to read a specific passage. Having some technical difficulties. Well, of course, I would suggest to read the whole book as well, but especially I want to get to one part. Okay, it was on, no, I remember, it was on 138. Hold on a sec, okay. And this page as well, okay. So, Colonel Russell Williams, first off, this was a fake interrogation because the police already knew he was guilty. They were covering up for him for years, okay. They literally took the victims and left them tied up in their basement and called the victims crazy. The Canadian police were in on it. They knew this guy was corrupt. But especially, I want to show you that this was clearly a disturbed individual, because not only was he a cross-dresser, but he literally went into women's houses and he stole their lingerie and underwear. And after he raped and murdered women, and not all the women were murdered, several of the women survived, like Lori Massacott. She was raped. She wasn't murdered, but she was raped, brutally raped. But she survived. She survived. So not all the women were murdered. So there were several survivors, but there were also women that were actually murdered as well. Rest in peace, rest in peace to those victims that were murdered and got lost their lives. And this guy was a sick psychopath, a Canadian military psychopath who not only raped and murdered women, but he also stole their lingerie and he stole their underwear. So this is clearly some sort of either he's transgender or cross-dresser. I think they would say call him a cross-dresser. I think to be transgender, they would have to have the surgery, right? So in this case, he's a cross-dresser. And he not only raped and murdered women, but he even went and stole their underwear and wore it. So, and now let's go to page 138. Hold on a sec, because there was a passage on page 138 I want to read to you guys. Really interesting, and it's kind of a clue as to the evil stuff, like how they cover up stuff. Okay. It's hard to hold the phone and to go to 138, but I'll get there. Okay. Okay, look at this. A week or so later, he augmented that photo file by taking additional pictures in his home of his most recently acquired lingerie trophies. And shortly thereafter, he added still more photos of the October 7 edition of the Weekly Tweed News, whose front page gave a prominent account of the two attacks on September 17th and September 30th. Williams had placed the newspaper in the fireplace of his Tweed cottage, set it alight, and photographed it 7 times while it burned. Also found in the same group of photos were more than a dozen screenshots of news and police websites reporting on the 2 sexual assaults. Okay. A week or so later, he augmented that photo file by taking additional pictures in his home. You see where I'm going with this? These people are not only psychopaths, but they are professionals at covering stuff up. They are professionals at covering stuff up. And there is so much more that these people have gotten away with. Like I said, Colonel Russell Williams is also linked to missing Americans. But of course, because these people are professional psychopaths, they're professional sociopaths, and they're amazing at covering stuff up, because of course these people, the government of Canada, they literally hire people just to cover stuff up. The government of Canada has teams. They work in gangs. They're gang stalkers. They work in gangs, and they have teams of people and lawyers. The lawyers are scumbags in Canada. Canadian lawyers will take victims, even victims they're representing, and totally twist the story and make the victims look crazy and like they're liars, like they did to Lori Massacott. Even apparently, Lori Massacott, her first lawyer was terrible. Lori Massacott's first lawyer was a scumbag who actually tried to make her look crazy and help further cover up for the government of Canada and Colonel Russell Williams. Because Canadian lawyers, they're scumbags, and they're not above taking a bribe. The Canadian police, the Canadian military, they got deep pockets. The Canadian police, the Canadian military, they got deep pockets, and they are not above bribing the Canadian lawyers to even misrepresent their own victims, their own clients, to even misrepresent their own clients. Canadian lawyers will purposely even misrepresent their own clients in favor of a cover-up because they want to get bribed and they want to get money from the government of Canada. The government of Canada constantly bribes lawyers to misrepresent their own clients and make their own clients look crazy. And Lori Massacott after she called the Canadian police and reported that, she had been raped and she left was it was tied up in her basement. Not only did they hung up the phone on her and call her crazy also and leave her tied up in her basement for hours, but then apparently even her first lawyer, Lori Massicot's first lawyer, also tried calling her crazy and tried to doing a major cover up and try to destroy her credibility. Lori Massicot's own lawyer, her first lawyer, the first lawyer she had, apparently had tried to destroy her credibility as well. So you can't trust Canadian lawyers either. They're scumbags. Canadian lawyers are scumbags. Canadian police are scumbags. And Canadian police are not only useless, but Lori Massicot called the Canadian police for help. And then they called her crazy and left her tied up in her basement for hours. Okay. And Canadian military guys, they're a gang of military psychopaths. So these people, not only are they murderers and serial killers and rapists, but they're also professionals at covering stuff up. Just like that passage, that paragraph that I showed you in this book on page 138. These people, not only are they murderers and rapists and psychopaths and sociopaths, lying sociopaths, but they are professionals at covering stuff up. And there's a lot more cases and there's a lot more victims. And that's why there's so much Americans don't even know. And once they know, once they find out, once Americans find out everything that the government of Canada has done, I would bet you that the American government and the American people would finally make Canada the 51st state. Once the American people find out exactly everything, and I'm going to tell as much as I know, all of when I worked on the Canadian military base for years, I'm going to tell as much as I know. There's probably even still more. But once, especially when I tell the American people what I know, and the cover-ups that I'm aware of, and all of the stuff that didn't even make the news, that was so heinous, that the Canadian government did, that was so heinous that the Canadian government wouldn't even let them make the news in the first place. Once I tell the American people all of this, I bet you the American people and the American government will be storming Canada and will finally make Canada the 51st state once and for all. Because the government of Canada, they need to be arrested. The entire Canadian government of Canada, along with this guy, along with all the other people that helped cover up for him, like his wife and the Canadian police. Look, the wife of serial killer Russell Williams loses her court battle because she lost her court battle because she was corrupt, just like a lot of the Canadians. So there are a lot of corrupt Canadians. They're covering stuff up, and so that's why I wanted to tell people. That's why I wanted to tell Americans. Canada is not the nice country that you think they are. It's the Canadians. It's a stereotype that Canadians are nice and this and that. Sure, some Canadians are nice, but there's a lot of evil Canadians. And especially those evil Canadians, they work in the government of Canada. They work as Canadian lawyers. They work as Canadian police officers. There's evil Canadian lawyers. There's evil Canadian police officers. There's evil Canadian military people. The government of Canada is screwed up. They do a lot of evil stuff. And once I am able to tell the full story without fear, because I being in Canada, I am vulnerable right now to being in Canada. I cannot just say everything. It's already even just risky just to talk about stuff that even made the news. But I even have information on stuff, cover-ups, major Canadian cover-ups that didn't even make the news. And I don't feel comfortable talking about absolutely everything and everything that I witnessed on that Canadian military base until I am given safety and refuge in another country. Doesn't have to be the United States. It could even be Russia, Germany, whatever, whichever country is willing to offer me safety and refuge. And of course, since I speak English, it would be easier for me to go to an English-speaking country for safety and refuge. But I also speak fluent Russian. I could go to Russia. And I don't mind either. I'll go to Germany. I'll go to any country. Even if I don't speak the language, I'll go to any country that's willing to offer me safety and refuge. And then I will be able to tell the full story, exactly what happened, everything that happened to other people, everything that happened to me, all of the evil stuff that the Canadian government does, all the stuff that they did to other people, the stuff that the Canadian government did to me. I'll finally be able to safely tell everything once I am safely out of Canada and given safety and refuge in another country. Hopefully, probably, preferably the United States or Germany, Russia, I don't care, any country, Poland, Switzerland, Sweden, I'll go anywhere. Any country that can take a refugee. I am a hardworking person. I am a nice person. I am an intelligent person. I am not crazy. The government of Canada destroyed my credibility. They ruined my life. You don't even know half the stuff they done to me. There is stuff that they done to me that is so traumatic that I can't even talk about it without breaking into tears. There is stuff that the government of Canada has done to me that is so heinous and so traumatic that I have severe post traumatic stress disorder. I have severe PTSD and I have severe post traumatic stress disorder. And there is stuff that is so traumatic that they did to me that I can't even talk about without breaking into tears. So I'm not going to even go there just yet. But I will once I am finally once a country of good people, of nice good people, once I find whichever country that is, and I'm not even sure if that's the United States at this point because obviously we know that the United States has a lot of corruption as well. But once ever I find that great country that is run by good people, when the government, I'm sure there's got to be at least one country where the government's actually good. There's got to be at least one country around the world where the government's run by good, sane, normal people. And whichever country that is, whether it be the United States or Germany or France or Russia, I will go to that country or even Japan, whichever country, right? So, but Candace Owens, especially Candace Owens, I tried contacting her. She's obviously an American investigative journalist, an American investigative reporter. I tried contacting Candace Owens, and so I'm hoping to get my story on her show as well. But it doesn't have to be her. Any investigative reporter. I am putting this message out there to any investigative reporter, journalist around the world. Sweden, Poland, Switzerland, Germany, Russia, any investigative reporter who's watching this live stream. If you can provide me safe refuge in your country as a Canadian whistleblower, I will tell you everything. I will tell everything that I saw, everything that I know that happened on that Canadian military base. I will tell Russia everything. I'll tell Germany everything. I'll tell France everything. I'll tell Poland or Sweden everything. Everything that I know that happened on that Canadian military base, I will tell to whichever country can provide me safe refuge. And finally, I can get away from these evil Canadians. Evil Canadians like this psychopath, and all of the evil stuff that they've done. So, so I just tried to look through comments. There's a lot of comments. I can't go through all of them. If anyone came in and left a comment, I apologize if I didn't wasn't able to look at or read your comment. It's hard to hold the phone and do a live stream at the same time, so I apologize. So I'll just read a couple of the comments and respond. But like I said, unfortunately I can't respond to every comment. So let's see. Um, PB and J came in and said, neither is the United States. Trust me. Yeah, I know. I've heard that there's a lot of corruption in the United States as well. That's why Candace Owens is constantly trying to expose the Epstein list, right? So of course, yeah, I know. Unfortunately, I heard that about the United States as well. But I don't think it's every state, right? Like, I think that there are states in the United States that are not corrupt. I hope it's not every state. I hope not every state in the United States is corrupt. I hope that there's at least one or two American states that are run by good, nice, normal people. Okay. So I'm not going to blanket statement and say that it's the entire United States. I know, of course, there is a lot of corruption in the United States, and like I said, I'm not even 100% sure about the United States if it would be safe, but I'm hoping at least that there's at least one or two good American states that could provide me safety or refuge. But like I said, it doesn't have to be the United States. It could be any country around the world. If they provide me safety and refuge, I will be willing to go. I'll tell the full story. I will finally get to expose the entire Canadian government and everything that happened on that Canadian military base that I worked on for years. So let's go to another comment. Miranda Madsen or came in. She's definitely not a fan of mine. And she said, evidence to make Canada the 51st state. Evidence for what? Under what law? This is incredibly idiotic. Well, thank you, Miranda Madsen, or for your comment. Thank you for your comment. I'm pro freedom of speech. I'm literally for years have been trying to exercise freedom of speech in Canada, and these Canadian Nazis, these Canadian, whatever exactly they are, these Canadian evil Canadians, this is why Canada is known for not having freedom of speech. This is why Canada, all these Canadians have been complaining for years that Canada is they don't allow freedom of speech, they don't have human rights. So I respect freedom of speech, and that includes you, Miranda Madsen, or I respect your freedom of speech to come in my live stream. And you like, I'll read your comment again. You said evidence to make Canada the 51st state. Evidence for what? Under what law? This is incredibly idiotic. Can Miranda Madsen, if you knew everything that happened, and you don't know yet, so I'm not going to fault you because you don't know. And a lot of Americans don't know the truth, the real truth about Canada. So of course, Americans who haven't found out the real truth about Canada yet, of course they will be confused. Of course they're going to think this is idiotic, but it's not, I promise you. So thank you for coming in. Thank you for your comment. And I will prove one day to the world why the entire government of Canada needs to be arrested. They all hire, like, the criminal Canadian government. They hire other criminals. The evil rich elites, the evil Canadian government, the evil rich people in the Canadian government, they hire other evil people. All the psychopaths, they hire other psychopaths. It's a whole network of psychopaths. The lawyers, the Canadian lawyers are scumbag psychopaths. Canadian police officers are scumbag psychopaths. They all hire each other. You think the Canadian police is going to hire an innocent, nice, hardworking, good person to work with them? If Canadian police are a bunch of psychopaths, they're going to hire other psychopaths, right? If Canadian police officers are a team already of psychopaths, if they're not going to go find, like, hire someone who, like me, who's a nice person, who tells the truth, who will tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth eventually, once I feel safe enough, once I'm in a country that I feel safe and I don't have to worry about the Canadian government attacking me again, because they've attacked me before many times, the government of Canada. Psychopaths like this have attacked me. Psychopaths like this guy. And if people want to say, oh, this sounds crazy, oh, you can't believe the government of Canada would do such a thing. Well, look at this. Look at this. Look at this psychopath who was the military commander of all of Canada, and he raped and murdered women for years, and he was even a cross-dresser, and he stole their underwear. So you want to say you don't believe me? You don't believe that I'm a victim? You can't believe how Canada could do such a thing? Well, they did, and here's a perfect example. This is just one news case. This is just one example, and there's many, actually, even articles. There's other articles. There's other cases in the Canadian news I could reference you. And there's, like I said, there's even stuff that hasn't even made the Canadian news that I am aware of. So if you're still thinking that Canada is this nice, innocent country, and you cannot believe that Canada could get away with doing something like this, well, they have, and here's your proof that they're obviously, Canadians are not all nice, innocent people. Okay, so you have been lied to by the fake news. The fake, especially the fake Canadian news, has lied to you and made it seem like Canada is this nice, safe country with all these nice people, and it's not true. There is a lot of corruption in Canada. I would say even more corruption in Canada than the United States, because Canada doesn't even allow Canadians to have guns to defend themselves. What was the whole reason for the Second Amendment? What was the reason for the American Second Amendment? So that American citizens can protect themselves from a corrupt government, right? Well, that's the Canadian government. The Canadian government is the tyrannical, corrupt government. Okay? So if the Canadian government, the tyrannical, corrupt government, will not allow Canadian citizens to have guns to defend themselves, why is that? Because the government's corrupt. The Canadian government's corrupt, and they will not, the tyrannical Canadian government's corrupt, and they will not allow Canadian citizens to have guns to defend themselves, right? So the whole point of the American Second Amendment was for American citizens to defend themselves against a corrupt, tyrannical government. That's the Canadian government. The Canadian government is so corrupt and tyrannical, they won't even let Canadian citizens have guns to defend themselves. So there you go. Everything eventually will come out. So I appreciate everyone's comment who came in. I understand you might think this sounds crazy or idiotic. You can't believe it. A lot of people have been lied to over the years about Canada, but this is real. And these news articles, like I said, you could look these up yourself. If this is just one of many news articles, this is just one of many cases. This is just one of many cases of corruption and psychopaths in Canada. But that you could start here. You could start here, and you could see that Canada is not the safe, nice country that the Canadian fake news has made it seem to be. Trump was right. Donald Trump, the president of the United States, he was right when he was chanting fake news, and especially the government of Canada. They are experts at covering stuff up. The government of Canada is experts at propaganda and fake news. They twist the story and then they make the victims look crazy. They take the psychopaths and they try to cover up for the psychopaths as much as possible. And then they take the actual victims and try to make the victims look crazy and try to destroy the credibility of the victims. The government of Canada constantly does this. So let's go if there's any comments. So Jeremy Pratt came in and he said, a real patriot doesn't hide behind once I feel safe. I have gone forward with information, and several years ago, they took down my YouTube channel. They went as far as to put me in prison. They beat me. And I was in the hospital. They followed me home. Psychopaths like this guy, like this monster, like this military side. There's a gang of them. There's a whole bunch of them. Like I said, it's not just one guy. The psychopaths, they hire other psychopaths. The Canadian military psychopaths, the Canadian military police psychopaths, the Canadian police psychopaths. It's not like it's just one guy. It's like if there are psychopaths in the Canadian police force, they hire other psychopaths. You see? Like they're not going to go hire nice, innocent people like me to work in the Canadian police force. The Canadian police, the psychopath Canadian police officers, they hire other psychopaths. So that way that they all protect each other, right? That's why you rarely see police officers turn on each other. You rarely see Canadian police officers arrest other Canadian police officers. Why? Because the Canadian police, they're a gang. They're a gang of thugs. They're a gang of rapists. They're a gang of murderers. They're a gang of psychopaths. And that's exactly why when Laurie Massacott, one of the victims of Colonel Russell Williams, like I was showing earlier in the earlier part of the live stream, which by the way, this live stream will be recorded, but I'm going to leave it up as well. Right, of course, it's live right now, but I'm also going to leave the live stream up so you could replay it after. And if you go to the first part of the live stream, you'll see that when Laurie Massacott, one of the victims of Colonel Russell Williams, when she called the police for help, they called her crazy and hung up on her and left her tied up in her basement for hours. And the Canadian police tried to destroy her credibility. And that's why Laurie Massacott sued the Canadian police, because they left her tied up in her basement. They tried to destroy her credibility. They called her crazy and hung up on her. So clearly, like, if that doesn't prove that the Canadian police are a big gang of criminals and thugs, rapists and murderers who cover up for each other, and especially because they're trying to cover up for their military buddy, if that doesn't prove that the Canadian police are like that, then I don't know what will prove to you. So it's a whole gang of them. There's a big gang. Look, even the wife. See the news article? Even the wife is part of the gang, because it says, wife of serial killer Russell Williams loses court battle. And this was after years of a court battle. Like of course, she didn't just initially lose the court battle. It took years to get her to lose the court battle. So she was covering up for this guy for years. The wife of Colonel Russell, his own wife, the wife of Colonel Russell Williams was covering up for him for years. Okay? So they're a big gang of criminals in Canada. It's a big gang of psychopaths and sociopaths and liars. So I really hope that Candace Owens sees this live stream, or not just her, but any investigative journalist. If you know of any investigative reporter, investigative journalist, Of course, I've contacted Candace Owens, and I did also contact a couple other investigative journalists as well. I'm hoping to get my story on the news, on on a YouTube channel, like with a big platform, because my YouTube channel doesn't have a big platform. It doesn't have millions of views yet. And also the other thing that I need is I need safety, and I need to leave Canada. I need to leave Canada permanently, and I've been wanting to leave Canada permanently for a while. I will not feel safe to tell absolutely everything because they did it to me in the past. They beat me up in the past. They attacked me. I got concussions. I was in the hospital. They just tried to destroy my credibility. They beat me up. They followed me. Psychopaths like this beat me up. So I will not feel comfortable to again and to tell everything until I am everything that I saw, everything I witnessed, everything I experienced, everything I know about all of the major cover-ups on that Canadian military base, stuff that the world doesn't even know, stuff that America doesn't even know, stuff that you wouldn't believe unless you heard it, saw it with your own eyes, right? I do not feel comfortable telling everything as a Canadian whistleblower until I have been given safe refuge in another country, until I can leave Canada forever, permanently. And then once I'm in that new country, that new safe country of refuge, then I will tell everything. Everything that I know, dates, times, names, with other witnesses, other people, cases involved. I worked for the Canadian military for years. I worked on a Canadian military base for years. I know lots of stuff. And I will be willing to give any country, whether it's the United States or Russia, Germany, Japan, France, Italy, Spain, any country, I'll give any country, I'll tell them everything. Absolutely, any country that's willing to give me safety and refuge from Canada, I will tell them everything. Okay, everything that I witnessed on that Canadian military base, all the evil stuff that the Canadian government's covered up that I'm aware of, because there's probably a lot more too. But there's a lot that I know that hasn't even made the news, and I will tell everything. So thank you to everyone who joined the live stream. I gotta go. But thank you to all the comments, everyone who left a comment. And trust me, the truth eventually will come out. It will come out once and for all eventually. Eventually, the truth will come out once and for all. And then finally, people will see all the sociopaths, all the psychopaths will finally be exposed once and for all, like this guy, for example. All right. Okay, thank you for coming to the live stream. Goodbye.